everybody, Chef AJ here, and welcome to Healthy Living. It is my pleasure, as always, to talk to our next guest, which is Dr. Doug Lisle, one of my favorite people on the planet to talk to, because every time I talk to him, he says the same thing, but in a different way with little nuances where I just learn so much. If you're not familiar with Dr. Lisle, he is not only the co-author of one of the greatest books ever written on any subject. It's called The Pleasure Trap. He's also the psychologist at both the McDougall Live-In Program and the True North Health Center, both located in Santa Rosa, California. And Dr. Lisle has an amazing website, www.esteemdynamics.org, where you can watch amazing videos for free on the lectures that he gives at places like the McDougall Program and True North. And you can even sign up for a private consultation with him. So please welcome my friend and colleague, Dr. Doug Lisle. Hello.
Hi there, AJ. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you have such a nice shirt on today. We both are wearing purple. This is like we did not call each other. So Dr. Lisle, I've talked to you so many times. You did a wonderful presentation off the cuff through Facebook Live in Atlanta that we've had like 5,000 people watching so far and commenting on. But I wanted to focus, if possible, on one subject that just keeps coming up in my practice, because a friend of yours and mine, Dr. Goldhammer, our colleague and friend, referred somebody to me a few weeks ago. And she was a woman who had followed a food plan through a food addiction program for 11 years, which is a strict weighing and measuring program. So what I wanted to talk about today is just in general the efficacy of these food addiction treatment programs that require weighing and measuring for the rest of your life. And I'm not here to bash any program because, guys, if it works for you, please keep doing it. But Dr. Lisle, I probably get 100 emails a day, and at least 20 of them are from people that are in these programs that are being driven crazy. They can't do it. They relapse, they gain their weight back, and they can't sustain it. So I want to see if maybe there's an alternative approach that might work for some of our people watching. But it's the first time Dr. Goldhammer actually referred somebody to me, so I was very honored. But I didn't think I could help her, and my first reaction was, well, this is a Dr. Lisle question, because she had said she'd been following a food addiction program for 11 years and did very well. She was able to maintain her weight loss. But now she found out, probably through forks over knives, about the whole food plant-based diet, and specifically about the most health-promoting version, which is the one that Dr. Goldhammer recommends and I recommend, which is not only whole food plant-based, but free of sugar, oil, salt, and flour. And she said, well, I'm not addicted to broccoli, so I'd really like to let go of weighing and measuring, but I'm scared, because she had done this for 11 years. And so my first instinct was to tell her to have a consultation with you. And then my second instinct was to say what you often say is, well, let's just run an experiment and let go of it for 21 days and see what happens. But I realized that she was very scared to do that. So what I said to her, I said, I'm going to talk to Dr. Lisle about this because I don't know the answer. I said, but my instinct tells me maybe you could just not weigh and measure your vegetables, because nobody could ever get fat from eating non-starchy vegetables. They're 100 calories a pound. So maybe you could still keep weighing and measuring your food, but just to kind of put your toe in the water, just don't measure your salad anymore or your raw vegetables and see how that works. Now, Dr. Lisle, the food plans on these food addiction programs are slightly different, but they're always very regimented. 3 meals a day, no snacks. Generally, you have to report it to your sponsor the day before, which, like, I'm on a plane. How do I know what I'm going to eat, or how hungry I'm going to be? They don't seem to make accommodations for people's activity level, for people's age or weight or things like that. So to give you an example of one of the food plans, this may not be this young lady's food plan, but like for one of my clients that I'm working with now, it's 4 ounces of protein, whatever that means. I'm guessing some kind of animal protein, because the food addiction people do still believe, except for one person, Dr. Joan Ifland, who's, I think, a wonderful resource, that you can't be vegan and overcome food addiction, that animal protein is the only thing that's going to work. So it's 4 ounces of protein, 6 ounces of a starch or grain, assuming you're at goal weight, which I guess could be like rice or sweet potatoes, and 7 ounces of non-starchy vegetables. So that is 17 ounces of food per meal, which is 51 ounces of food per day. Dr. Lisle, I eat more than that each meal. So I'm going to shut up now and just let you talk about the efficacy of weighing and measuring. Does it work? Who will it work for? And is there a better way to? Because I basically just listened to you when I needed to lose weight. And to me, that's the way. You do what Dr. Lisle says. You do what Dr. Goldhammer says. Done. But go ahead.
Yes, we're gonna take a wide-angle lens to this problem so that people can feel confident about the logic. Okay. So first of all, no animal on Earth weighs and measures its food. So this is an utterly human activity. Okay? So this is very useful to understand this, that that there are 4,000 species of mammals, and there's exactly one of them that's weighing and measuring its food, right? So right away, that should make us suspicious. Why are we doing this? The answer is because they're overweight, right? So let's get this straight. So we've got 3,999 species of mammal that are not overweight. We've got one that's overweight, and its solution is to weigh and measure its food, which was not something that the other 3,999 mammals are doing, right? So right away, I've got a problem with weighing and measuring that is entirely inconsistent with animal behavior. And
Bailey apparently agrees with you because she doesn't weigh and measure her food either.
right on cue.
Yeah, exactly. I could have planned it better.
So this is an absurd concept, and it doesn't. There's just simply no logic to it. Now, what we're going to do though is we're going to look at the fact that you can see how people got here, and they got here because if they eat to satiation on the foods that they're eating, then they wind up gaining weight, and so they're not going to do that. There we go. There's the culprit. And so as a result of this, what we have is we've just simply got people going down the incorrect pathway. So human beings have a remarkable ability to override what it is that they want to do, and to essentially use their willpower to try to grit their teeth and go another direction. So this makes us it's possible for us to go to the dentist and put up with somebody clamoring around in our mouth and scratching our gums and making us uncomfortable. We can do this in a way that other animals can't do it. We can't communicate with them and tell them, hey, this is for your own best interest, we're going to do this, it's going to be uncomfortable. No, they'll just freak out. They can't do it. Human beings can do that. So human beings can do uncomfortable things if they're instructed that it's in their best interest. And so that's going to include weighing and measuring your food. So people are doing this thing even though it's a completely unnatural behavior. And they're doing this and they think, they're being told by, lean, intelligent people that this is the way to do things. And it makes intuitive sense. And in fact, it will work. So if you want to override your instincts about eating as much as you want, use supreme willpower to do this, and be very uncomfortable for a majority of your existence, then a few people, not very many, but a few people with extraordinary motivation and unusual personalities can manage to do this and actually eat less than they would want consistently and keep their weight lower than it would normally be given the diet that they're eating. This is an unbelievable way of doing things. I would say that this is the equivalent if you had an animal like Bailey, and you had her on food that was unnaturally rich, so she would gain weight. Is it she?
It's a she, and actually that happened when I first adopted her. I was giving her the wrong food, and she did gain 5 pounds. And when I fed her the right food, she lost the weight.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the ways we could have had Bailey lose this weight, if we were concerned about this and we thought that this was unhealthy, is that we would simply feed her the same rich food, but feed her half of it or 2/3 of it. And we would find some amount that was just the right amount to keep her at what the vet said would be an ideal weight. Meanwhile, Bailey would be incredibly upset, constantly thinking about food.
And eating food at the park because she was so hungry and scavenging. Yeah.
And eating cat poop. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever it took. All right, so this is absolutely no way to treat an animal, and it's no way to treat yourself. And so the solution then is to bring the camera back and realize, well, now wait a second. None of these creatures in nature ever do weighing and measuring. They never try to override their hunger drive. They always eat to satiation repetitively throughout their life. In the same way that they breathe to satiation, they sleep to satiation, they drink water to satiation. This is what they do. Okay, this is why you have satiation mechanisms. Satiation mechanisms are unbelievably sophisticated. They're primarily located in the hypothalamus, and they're designed by nature to keep you not only alive, but keep you optimally healthy. So they could have you breathing 1% more than you're breathing right now, but it wouldn't do you any good. Or 1% less, that wouldn't do you any good either. So the oxygen requirements for humans are within extremely narrow parameters, and your respiration rate rises and falls automatically to try to keep it there. So the same thing is true with your hunger drive. Okay, so people look at the world and they say, well, no, that's not true, or they say it's not true for me. And yet, you and I know that if people move into True North Health Center, remarkably, they can eat to satiation, and if they're overweight, they lose weight, and if they are at about ideal weight, then they stay the same.
Yeah.
And what they don't have to do is weigh or measure their food, because we now have the animal in its natural dietary habitat.
Right.
Okay, so the solution is to get into your natural dietary habitat. The solution is not to weigh and measure your food.
Right. I believe you were on the panel that I moderated in Atlanta, or one of the events, and a question like that was answered. And I believe it was you or Baxter Montgomery concurred that the only reason a human being would have to weigh and measure their food is because they're not eating the right food. And on these food addiction program plans, they're required to have 1 tablespoon of oil per meal. Well, right there, that's, I'm bad at math, like 54 grams of fat. What they're required to have a day in fat is more fat than I eat in an entire, probably 2 weeks almost. And, they just don't understand calorie density. They don't understand plant-based diets.
Right.
And I think the only way to not be overweight on a non-whole food plant-based diet is really to weigh and measure your food. And it just seems like, I don't know where it came from, Dr. Lisle. I do remember my mom, who was morbidly obese, going to Weight Watchers,
Sure.
counting calories, but it never worked. And it seems like the recidivism rate is very high with these programs. You only hear about the success stories. Same with Alcoholics Anonymous. You only seem to hear about the success stories. And I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Lance Stotis, who wrote The Sober Truth, but he talked about how these 12-step programs, in his opinion, do more harm than good, but that what works about them is the camaraderie and the brotherhood and being in a support group. But the tool just seems to me completely unsustainable to have. I mean, I've never weighed and measured my food, and I eat probably more than anyone. So, it is a way if you want to do it, but it just seems very stressful and limiting and really not necessary, because if you're eating under the hunger drive, won't you get cranky and hungry and then eat more? Like, to give you an example, I injured my back on September 10th. So for 3 months, I've been wearing this very restrictive brace. And I eat pretty much the same thing every day. For lunch, I'll eat probably 2 pounds of roasted sweet potatoes and a pound of broccoli. And it's a huge plate of food. Well, with this brace on, I couldn't finish because I was mechanically being restricted. And so I felt full, but I was still hungry. And so what would happen then is I would have to eat, then finish it in 2 hours instead of all in one sitting. But I just can't imagine eating under the hunger drive. And I think that if they're eating the wrong foods, like oils and animal products and processed food, they're not going to be satiated anyway. So you want to talk about what they should be eating so that they don't have to weigh and measure their food?
Of course. So human natural history, we ate a variety of foodstuffs from raw vegetable material that might have been 100 calories a pound, all the way up to nuts and seeds at 2,500. Most of the time we were eating foods of quite low calorie density. The reason why you can tell this is because you can tell how much food it takes to satiate a human. So typically a human will be satiated on 5 pounds of food a day. Mm-hmm. That would be an unusual amount. So you say these people are eating 17 ounces 3 times?
3 times a day.
51 ounces, which is
about 3 pounds, right?
About 3 pounds. So that's enough. Really on the light side.
Yeah.
So therefore, I would expect that they are eating under the hunger drive. But if and the way it is that they're feeling okay is that we're dumping a little oil in there. So we're getting some rich food in there, and the people that's more for their taste buds to make the program popular. And of course, some ignoramus that may be the dietitian that is actually giving us the breakdown on that program thinks that they need oil for their essential fatty acids. And no doubt that's probably honest ignorance, but it plays beautifully into what people want. So as John McDougall has famously said, people love to hear good news about their bad habits. So everybody wants to hear about how they need, a tablespoon or whatever it is. It's ridiculous.
At least 2 teaspoons per meal, and some of them are a tablespoon per meal. So that's like 400 calories just from fat. You can have an entire pound of sweet potatoes for the same amount of calories that these food addiction programs are telling you need in fat.
Absolutely. And so human beings never ate oil. This is not part of our natural history, obviously. If there were, there'd be little bottles of oil out there in the world, and there aren't. I remember when we finished the Pleasure Trap and we were trying to promote it, and a lot of people weren't interested in hearing the message, which didn't surprise us any, and we had no despair over this. Alan Goldhammer commented to me about a year later. He says, if we had written a book called The Chocolate Diet, it would have been successful. And apparently somebody wrote such a book and it was successful.
Funny, that's funny.
And so, no surprise.
Yeah.
So, yes, people need to know that. I'm sure there's other examples of this concept around. There probably would be many. But I will, for anybody out there that happens to be a golfer, I will give this example too. And that is that golfers that don't know what they're doing and they're just learning, when they grab the golf club, they will grab it very tightly. And it's called strangling the club. They're so tense about it. They're so tense about how to move this club that they just contract their hands very, very hard around that club. And a golf pro will immediately see this, and you can see it from a mile away. There's no way you could swing a golf club properly by having a tight grip. You have to have a very relaxed grip. In fact, with outstanding golfers, sometimes they'll let go of the club and it'll go flying behind them because their grip is so relaxed. This is how we want to live with respect to our food. We want to be very relaxed about it. We want to be essentially cooking too much food. We want to be eating as much of it as that you want and not worrying about when we're going to be looking at the clock so we can eat again to get rid of our raging hunger drive. We want to have a very relaxed grip on the concept of how much we're eating. The only place where we have a grip is on what we're eating. And so that is the solution to this problem. It's the solution that every animal on Earth uses, and human beings simply need to mimic their animal brethren and they'll be fine.
Yeah. I would love to interview or at least talk to whoever invented these food plans, but I can't seem to find the history of that because I don't understand how it's a one-size-fits-all. How, for instance, in Ultimate Weight Loss, we have a gal who's 4'10" and we have a gal who's 6'2". So how can, even if it is correct amount of food, which I don't believe it is,
yes,
how can you give one plan to the same sex, the same weight, the same age? And then what about when you exercise? On days that I exercise, I'm a lot hungrier. So it seems to me when you're doing some kind of external control, you're never in touch with how you're feeling. And I don't know how you feel about this, Dr. Lisle, but to tell people they have to eat 3 meals a day and no snacks, I mean, I can't eat in the morning. Some days I don't get hungry till 2 or 3 o'clock. So should I just make sure that I'm eating that 7? I want to understand this, guys. I'm not trying to criticize your program if it works for you, but I get so many people for whom it didn't work, and I want to help these people realize that there's another way because they are very scared to stop
yes,
weighing and measuring. They're scared to let go, and they're scared to stop weighing themselves. Another thing that you and I think that you don't need to do if you're following the right diet, the diet taught at True North. They've had 30,000 patients come in their doors over 30 years. Not one of them has gained weight. Those that needed to lose weight has lose weight. And at True North, I mean, this is what helped me is working with you and True North, seeing that every slim employee there took not one, but 2 11-inch plates at every meal with food piled this high. And they were all thin. And I'm like, I want to do what they're doing. And when you do what they're doing, you will be slim.
Well, I did have an intern who came in about 15 years ago. Pretty young lady. And she came in and she lost a little bit of weight. She came in a little bit heavy, lost a little bit of weight, and then it stayed there. She still had more weight to lose. And it was clear to her that she had more weight to lose. And she was quite frustrated. And so finally, after about 3 or 4 months, she asked to talk to me. And she said, listen, I'm doing everything perfectly just the way we do it here. And I clearly have 10 pounds to lose. What's going on? And I said, well, tell me what it is that you're eating. She goes, oh, just what's out in the kitchen. And so then she told me what was on her salad. What was on her salad was a huge handful of nuts, all kinds of raisins, dates, and avocado. Okay, so we had a little bit of lettuce there, but essentially what we had was a
dessert.
I mean, and of course, she was healthy as a horse because that is all healthy food.
Right.
But it was too rich. And so as soon as I had her back off, put half on avocado and half the amount of nuts on there, then she lost weight. So this is how this works. So of course, even within the realm of natural foods, different people have to be a little bit careful about just how rich they make that food.
Right.
But this is the way to go, folks. I mean, this is you simply behave according to your design, and we don't have to do this. The other things that you're saying are absolutely correct. That I never have a plan about what I'm going to eat that day in terms of amount or even when.
Mhm.
So a chapter in Dr. Wayne Dyer had a book. He had several books, but one of his early books, he made an interesting comment that I liked, which was, first, be a good animal. And so in this way, you eat when you're hungry, eat as much as that you want, etc. In other words, just learn to trust this. And Dr. Dyer, I'm sure, wasn't aware of what to eat, so he didn't understand the importance of that. But if we add that general message to our knowledge of what it is that we should be eating, then we can let go and not be strangling the golf club.
Yeah.
And that's we want to have a nice relaxed swing in this life, and that's how we're going to do it.
Well, the food addiction, people say that it's important to eat at structured times because that's what's going to keep you safe from not overeating. But to me, it teaches you to overeat, because why would you eat if you're not hungry? And I really want to understand this. I don't.
This is because they don't understand.
Right.
So what you're doing is you're listening to people who are working with people and themselves usually are impassioned, or they wouldn't have been in this line of work.
Right.
And that have struggled themselves and they're lost. And so the only thing that they have found, anybody that ever started a program like this and sold it and made it their life's work, they themselves are probably very hyper-conscientious, regimented individuals. And so they may have actually executed a plan where they override their instincts repetitively, and they are one of the 3 in 100 that can actually successfully do this, even though it's torture their whole lives. So the answer is no. They're making a massive mistake, and incidentally, to the extent that they eat foods that are inconsistent with health, their limitations of those foods are not going to save them from atherogenesis or cancer.
Right.
In other words, you eat your few ounces of fish or whatever it is that you're eating every day, and you're statistically increasing your likelihood of tragedy. It doesn't matter if it's limited.
Absolutely.
So we have the answer.
Yeah.
The answer is to be eating a predominantly or exclusively whole natural plant foods diet, or something very close to that. So a minimum of processed foods. And if we stay right there, your people will be very successful. And another thing that I would speak about for a few minutes would be what I'm going to call mirror monkeys. If you put a monkey in front of a mirror, they're constantly having to look at themselves. They're just so curious about themselves. And they'll hang around the mirror and keep swinging around and going back and peeking at it. This is what people on weight loss or weight management programs do. Is a lot of times they are addicted to peeking at the scale. And what we want them to do is to understand that the proper way to look at weight would be really on the order of once a month. In other words, you would want to have a behavior pattern that you were planning to do and then execute that behavior pattern. So in this case, it would be to loosen the reins on what it is that you're doing, and then let's sit back and find out what happens in a month if you do this. Let's get rid of the oil that you're eating every day. Oil is the #1 culprit that I always see when it comes to excess weight on people. There are other culprits, but that is overwhelmingly the #1 culprit. Is people are getting their snoot into oil somewhere, and people on these kinds of diets are pouring the oil into their diet. So we remove the oil. We relax the grip on what it is that people are eating, and then we sit back and we watch for a month. And we don't actually to do good science on yourself for weight, a good thing to do is to measure yourself 3 consecutive mornings, say at the beginning of a month, and then take the average. And so now we have essentially a pretty good baseline. And then a month later, we do the same thing. We measure 3 days in a row and we take the average. And typically we're going to see, well, if people are going from a higher density diet to a lower density diet, their weight will tend to drift down. If they go from a lower to a higher, their weight is going to drift up. But one of the things that they don't need to do is to be restricting intake. We don't. What we want to do, folks, is we want to find out how much trouble we're in. What we want to do is we want to start out with a vision of how we would like to live. And that the way we'd like to live is to not be restricting your dietary intake, for goodness sakes. And so as a result, we might as well find out what you're up against. And so I encourage people to take a month experiment and to do what it is that we would tell them to do. And then at the end of the month, find out where we are. And if it turns out that you're in the same place where you started, not bad. Then we didn't have to like hold our breath and panic at every meal and weigh and measure anything, and we wound up in the same place. If it turned out we lost a little weight, great. The odds of us gaining a little bit of weight, which is people's great fear, is extremely remote, and it's important to test it. If it turns out that, oh my goodness, you gained 2 pounds, which would be pretty surprising. 2 pounds would be 8,000 calories of tissue in 30 days. I would be very surprised if that would happen, but if it did, we understand how easy it is to take it off. And so as a result, it's worth the experiment to find out rather than spend our lives gripping the club.
Right, because it seems like they fear that loss of control, and
yes,
and that seems to be where they would have to talk to you. I can't help them with that. I can help them with the food, but I can't help them with the fear that they have of letting go of that control. You know, at True North, where you work and where I get to work sometimes coming up, they
Sure.
have a 24-hour salad bar.
yes,
Which is available 24 hours a day with huge offerings of every kind of non-starchy vegetables and fruit. And then 3 times a day, hot food appears. Maybe a soup, some starches like potatoes or rice or beans, and some non-starchy vegetables. And then over in a corner, on a tiny, tiny table, they have a tiny food scale. Tiny, tiny one, like a postal scale, with some nuts and seeds for people like me that would go crazy. And so that's the only thing that and they don't encourage you to measure them, but it has that there. And I don't have a problem if people have a problem with the hyperpalatable foods like nuts and want to see what an ounce is, because like you said, this example you gave of the lady, people can, overestimate or underestimate. But what I don't understand about the food addiction plans is why you would limit non-starchy vegetables to 7 ounces a day. These foods can be as low as 67 calories a pound. This is where all our nutrition is. Why would you ever, I can understand telling people, no, not a lot of animal products or oil. You better be measuring those, or nuts. But why you would ever restrict a food like non-starchy vegetable? The idea is we want to, at least according to Dr. Goldhammer, eat as much of those as we possibly can for satiation, for health.
Yeah, just sheer ignorance.
Yeah.
And it's really, their ignorance is deep and profound. They do not understand what it is that we understand. They are not, they don't have a wide angle lens of looking at this as a worldwide animal biological problem that animals have to solve. They don't understand that human beings have the same magnificent equipment in them as all the other animals, and therefore we do not have to consciously solve this problem any more than an aardvark does.
Yeah.
And so they are way lost. And in quiet despair, the only thing that they've come up with is conscious control. And this is, you are correct to be astounded at the level of ignorance here. And this is what, I wrote this in The Pleasure Trap 15 years ago, that the vast majority of weight loss experts have no idea what's going on. That ignorance remains true today. Nothing has changed 15 years later. And so I actually will submit that some of these, actually not necessarily some, I will submit that Weight Watchers specifically is, which is, I'm sure, the last I checked, a weigh and measure type of...
Yeah, well, they do points, but one
Right.
good thing is now non-starchy vegetables finally are unlimited. Finally, yeah.
Right, but Weight Watchers in general, and the Weight Watchers food, etc. This is going to go nowhere. So people are not going to be successful typically on this, and the research evidence indicates that when people do Weight Watchers programs, nothing happens. However, and there's a lot of Weight Watchers junk food.
Oh yeah, buy their little processed food bars.
Oh sure,
Yeah,
but it has Weight Watchers on it, and I really think that Weight Watchers is in a different business than people think that it's in. I really personally see Weight Watchers as in the business of defending people's esteem. that really they are in the status business in the same way that Mercedes-Benz is. Mercedes-Benz is really not in the car business. They're really in the status business. They're selling a car that has these little luxury appointments and this cachet and advertising that are really showing that, hey, I can afford to waste $30,000 on my automobile. I mean, it's not a whole heck of a lot different than a Toyota Camry, but it is a little bit different, certainly, but not much.
Right.
And then we make it $75,000, and it indicates that we were wealthy enough to waste that money. If anybody's driving a Mercedes right now, don't take any offense, but this is the business that they are in. And the same thing is going to be true in the clothing line. So at Neiman Marcus, this is the business of defending people's status. And so in the same way that Weight Watchers is not in the weight loss business. If they're truly in the weight loss business, they would have been recognized as an abysmal failure, and they never would have made any money, and they would have gone broke. No question about this. The fact that they are so widespread and commercially successful tells you that they are not in the weight loss business. They are in the status defense business. And so what they are is they are the publicly acknowledgeable place where if you are overweight, if you tell your family and friends that you are doing Weight Watchers, then it's showing that you are conscientious and you are intelligent and you are emotionally stable. Therefore, you have a good, solid personality, and we should not look down on you because you're overweight. It is a desperately needed status defense because people have considerable penalties that they pay psychosocially as a result of being overweight in our culture and pretty much any culture. So being overweight indicates that there was something wrong. Mm-hmm. And that what is wrong isn't your brain, and it isn't your personality, and it isn't your health. What's wrong is that your diet is bad. And as a result, but people don't necessarily make that inference. They make the inference that you are a slob, okay, because you effectively look sloppy. It makes it look like you're not conscientious. It makes it look like you're not intelligent. Essentially, it makes it look like you're not with it and you're not sharp and that you've got emotional problems. In fact, a lot of psychologists believe that that's true, that you have emotional problems and that's what's causing you to be overweight, which is absurd. Okay, so the exact opposite is true. The psychological problems are the result of having the weight. They're not the cause of the weight. And as a result of this, people then do something to try to deal with the psychological pain that the weight is causing. And what they do is they'll go to Weight Watchers to mitigate the status loss that is associated with having a weight problem. You will not fix the weight problem. You will fix the status loss associated with the weight problem as best that you can. And it's something, but we have a massively better solution, which is to fix the weight problem.
Right. And it can be fixed, and it can be fixed. Working with you or Dr. Goldham, or even considering the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, just going to True North, you can see that it's possible.
Sure. And you've had many people, you've had spectacular successes, AJ, with people that have been in your group, and people whose lives have been completely and utterly transformed.
Without weighing or measuring a single drop of food. You know, when you think about it, Dr. Lisle, it's sort of like to tell somebody with a weight problem they need to weigh and measure your food is like telling an alcoholic it's okay to still drink, but just drink a measured amount of alcohol. Well, that doesn't work. I mean, until they get the food right, I don't see how it's going to work, because if you and I weighed and measured our food to 17 ounces a day with what we ate, we would starve. We would starve.
Yes, we would.
Because we're not eating processed oils. We're not eating, all those hyperpalatable, hypercaloric foods. We need to eat more food. And until they understand calorie density, I don't think they're ever going to be able to break out of this restrictive weighing and measuring mindset.
You know, what is also interesting about this is two things. What you and I are talking about and what it is that we understand is counterintuitive. Okay, it makes sense if you're overweight, you're eating too much. Mm-hmm. The notion that there's a differences in calories of the food stuff is not really that obvious to people. So that's really not part and parcel of their thinking. And here's what's really not part and parcel of their thinking. And that is they cannot imagine that there's a factor of 30 difference in the calorie density.
Actually, 40 when you think of vegetables at 100 and oil at 4,000 calories per pound, it's a 40-fold difference.
You're not supposed to be that good at math. I wasn't thinking all the way to oil. Very good, but you're absolutely right. It is actually 40 to 1, and that is so extraordinary. To the notion of that if you had essentially, a cubic inch of food here, and you thought that was, and you knew what that was going to do to your stomach and your satiation, and then you realized there was something else that was 40 cubic inches of food. It's like, wow, those are the same? And the answer is yes, those are the same in terms of their calorie density. Towards their net calories. And so that notion is very counterintuitive. It's so counterintuitive that to get to where it is that you and I live psychologically with respect to food, it actually took a surprising amount of learning. And you had to challenge your sort of natural thinking about the subject and learn and grasp the fact that there were some realities here that didn't come easily. But once you get those realities in mind, and if you are afraid of them, then I would recommend that you test them. That you actually check. Okay, give yourself a nice check. Take 30 days and find out what happens by doing it this way, and find out whether or not there's anything to fear from not gripping the club so tightly.
Every time I did one of your experiments and I was afraid, I actually ended up losing weight because I was afraid. Well, I'm like, okay, well, you can eat potatoes and not be fat, but definitely you can't eat rice. And you would have me do these experiments and you'd say, well, you're going to do it and the most you'd gain is a pound or two. But every time I did what you said, I'd end up losing weight. I think you said something really brilliant once about how there's no gazelle on the African savannah that's sitting there worrying about whether they should eat one blade of grass or two. And
Yes.
you followed that up in a recent interview where you said there's no correct amount of food to eat
Right.
for a day, for an hour. And that really helped me because sometimes I think I still overeat, whatever that means. Or maybe,
Right.
and I'm talking about whole natural food. I eat only
Yes.
fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. I do not eat any sugar, flour, chocolate, alcohol, nuts, seeds, or added oil or animal products. So my calorie density is 550 calories per pound or less. And so I was under the impression from Dr. Rolls is I could eat ad libitum as much as I want, as often as I want, until comfortably full. Well, occasionally I eat a little bit past comfortably full if the potato is particularly good. And I'm like, oh my God, I overate. But then what happens is it just takes a lot longer for me to get hungry.
Sure.
Yeah,
no animal's brain could possibly solve the problem of what is the right amount to eat right now. It's not solvable for exactly the reasons that you just talked about. The right amount for what? For 2 hours? For 2 hours and 13 minutes? For 2 hours and 27 minutes in weather that's going to be 5 degrees colder than I just did? Like, what is the right amount of food? There is no right amount of food. There is all there is the right amount of food over an extended period of time. So there's a right amount of calories to eat this week, but there's not a right amount of calories to eat this morning. And so as a result, we never have to worry about those times when we, quote, overeat or we eat a tremendous amount of food because we're really hungry. Notice, actually, there is never a time when if you're eating whole natural foods, you are going to eat a huge amount of calories. But if you were to eat some very rich whole natural foods, and you were to, quote, overeat in quotes, the truth is that you would have essentially high amount of glycogen storage, and you would not be hungry for a good long while. Sometimes people will do that if they eat a fair amount of calories in the nighttime. They are not hungry until noon the next day. No problem. Just be a good animal, follow your instincts, and there is nothing to worry about.
Well, believe it or not, people still worry about eating starch. And one of the things that I find, look, I don't want to say because I don't want to offend people that this is what works for them. I'd love to interview the people that founded this system to find out why and how it came to be. But a lot of the food addiction experts, and by the way, none of the food addiction experts are teaching a plant-based program that's whole food plant-based without sugar, oil, salt, except for Dr. Goldhammer. And if they did that diet, I don't think weighing and measuring would be needed. But one of the things they say is we have to limit starch because people that suffer from food addiction, which is refined food addiction or processed food addiction, they have carbohydrate sensitivity. So we can't give them too much rice or potatoes, especially at the beginning. And so they say like, well, if you're going to be vegan, it's going to have to be like nuts and beans. I mean, I can't eat beans for a particular GI reason, and I don't eat nuts because I can't moderate them. I mean, I couldn't do their program because I would fail because that's all I eat is potatoes and rice. And how do we get over this starch-ophobia that people still have, that they're going to gain weight? Because you can't gain weight from potatoes and rice, right? Isn't that like de novo lipogenesis? We can't convert carbohydrate to fat. How do we prove? I mean, I can prove it because I'm thin and that's all I eat. I'll eat a 3-pound bag of sweet potatoes every day, and so what?
We can convert carbohydrate to fat, but not very efficiently.
I see.
Okay? And so, yes, but once again, the ignorance is deep and profound. The notion that starches are a problem, I actually have no idea where this comes from, but it may come from the notion that when people do eat starches, if they eat a potato, it's a fairly large item. And so people are looking at that and thinking that if you eat big things, you get big. See what I'm saying? I think it's really probably almost that simple. If you eat a big plate of rice, you're going to get big. And of course, this is not true. And so I am not actually sure where this misinformation started or where it came from. And it may have come from multiple sources across the last 100 years. But it is horrendously mistaken. We've got 2 billion Asians eating as much rice as they want. Not a single one of them are fat. Okay? The only ones that are fat are in Beijing, pouring oil all over their steak. So this is a huge misunderstanding that as we continue to learn more about human natural history, and we continue to learn more about essentially the wiring of the brain and the palate and how it works, we see more and more evidence of the importance of starches, and that they have been around and they've been a critical part of human nature for more than 1 million years. So the notion also that came out of Barry Sears in The Zone, which is that we became starch eaters with the dawn of agriculture, and that this is an unnatural turn in the history of humans, is mistaken. So we can see that the human genetic code has been coding for amylase, which is the enzyme needed to digest starch, for a long time. This goes back, hundreds of thousands of years. So we certainly ate a variety of foodstuffs, and I wouldn't argue that we were vegans in our natural history. We were not. We currently believe that it is likely to be the case that a whole natural food, starch-based vegan diet is probably the optimal diet for our species, or it's very close to it. The inclusion of animal foods, while the system can tolerate it, looks to be something that is problematic, certainly in large amounts, and possibly problematic in small amounts, particularly if you've got any kind of physiological compromise. The only research that has ever been shown to reverse atherogenesis, which is our number one health mortality risk, is going to be a vegan diet. And so this is, or near vegan. Ornish got some reversal on a 97% vegan diet, which was not as good as the results, tellingly, as the results that we had by Esselstyn, which was 100%. Mm-hmm. So literally that difference may be a difference in what the body needs to do when it's in that tight of a corner. So my point is that the ignorance about not thinking, essentially thinking that starches are somehow a bad thing is pretty incredible. And I have possibly something that comes to mind for me, just as speculation, is that the measurement of blood sugars with diabetics, certainly if you eat a white potato and you're a diabetic, you will see your blood sugar spike. This is not the cause of the diabetic condition, it's the result of the diabetic condition. And people will resolve the diabetic condition if they eat those potatoes. but sometimes this freaks out their doctors, and it may freak them out, and so they may want to eat other things like squashes. But the solution to the problem is not to stay away from starches. It's to stay away from the high-fat food that is causing the insulin resistance that is in fact the root of the problem.
Yeah.
So there are some reasons why dietitians and doctors that are ignorant and lay people that are ignorant are parroting around information that is deeply mistaken, but they certainly are. And that's why we are an unusual place where people resolve these conditions, eat to satiety. They resolve diabetic conditions, they resolve weight problems, and they do not weigh and measure anything.
Right.
And that is the solution to this problem.
Yeah, I don't know any of the plant-based doctors or educators or programs that's advocating that we may weigh and measure your food. I don't know if a lot of the doctors in the plant-based movement just don't believe in food addiction, or they're doing other things, they're not addressing it. But do you have any idea why the experts in food addiction that are not treating it with our diet style, whole food, plant-based, without oil, they seem to believe that animal protein is necessary and superior to combat this disease, that, plant protein, and they talk about the brain chemistry and the carbohydrate sensitivity. I mean, I don't, I'm not a doctor, but
Gross ignorance.
Yeah.
So I think that it's astounding when you really get down to it, that this is a very myth-based little subculture. And they parrot one myth after the next, and it never gets challenged by anybody within their domain.
Mm-hmm.
And they go about. This is one of these issues where when things are superficially correct, in other words, they appear to be correct, they essentially satisfy human explanatory needs, like eat small food, get small; eat big food, get big. Very simple things of this nature, and also it's also notable that human preferences would be to eat cheese and to eat slices of ham. In other words, on toast with mayonnaise. So as a result of that, people are going to want to hear good news about their bad habits, and they are going to have these superficial understanding. The mirror monkeys will, if they eat a big bunch of food, they get on the scale, they've now gained 1.5 pounds because they just ate 1.5 pounds of our food. Whereas if they eat 6 ounces or 7 ounces or whatever ludicrous little measurement they have, then when they step on the scale, they've only gained 7 ounces. So as a result, they're using an incorrect method to try to assess this process. And as a result, these myths perpetuate. Mm-hmm. So I cannot tell you how many people have told me things like, oh no, I can't do that because when I did that, I gained 2 pounds, in 2 days. It's like, it's impossible. You couldn't have possibly gained 2 pounds of tissue in 2 days. You could easily gain 5 pounds of fluid in 2 days. Mm-hmm. In fact, at the True North Health Center, I think our record was somebody lost 18 pounds overnight. Okay, so they came in obviously bloated on a high salt diet. They went on a water fast. Their kidney caught up and they dumped a bunch of sodium, and they literally were on the toilet all night long, and they dropped 18 pounds in about 10 hours. Conversely, we had a woman that left True North Health Center after a long fast and had done extremely well, and then went to San Francisco and ate a meal at a French restaurant, and 24 hours later was 9 pounds heavier.
Wow.
And called us all upset.
Yeah.
Okay? And so people believe that when you look at the scale on an hourly basis, it's telling you the truth about what's happening in the process. It is telling you nothing of the kind. It's like essentially trying to assess the direction of this year's stock market by looking at what's happening in the next hour. It is a useless way to analyze the problem. You must analyze the problem if you're looking at the stock market. Look at it a month at a time. Don't look at it a minute at a time.
Right.
And so we, unfortunately, some people very concerned about solving this problem will get very analytical down to the level of whether I ate this thing and whether I gained weight in the next 60 minutes. And this will lead them into a big trap of thinking that big food causes them to be big, when in fact big food causes you to be small.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things the food addiction programs teach, which I personally believe in, is the abstinence from sugar and flour, because I think those are horrible foods for our brains, and but they're just too calorically dense. But what I don't understand is when they talk about how some people are addicted to volume eating, and that they'll say, well, there are people that'll eat a pound of carrots. And I think part of it is, well, number one, they're not getting enough food on their food plan. But number two, I don't see people binging on carrots unless A, they're not eating enough starch, or B, they're just not eating enough food, so they pick something like carrots. I mean, I don't see people that go to True North and eat our diet having the problem where they're overeating on non-starchy vegetables. I mean, it doesn't seem possible to me. So they say, and again, a lot of this you're saying are myths, that I guess that when we overeat just in general, it doesn't even matter what it is, that our stretch receptors, something happens where there's more serotonin. So they say that people get addicted to volume eating, and that is why we must rein it in and tightly weigh and measure our food 3 meals a day and report it. How do you report what you're going to eat before you eat it? And if you don't have integrity. And a lot of people come away with shame, and they feel like they failed because they can't do these rigid programs. And I want them to understand there's nothing wrong with you guys. It's the program. Try another program.
Once again, ludicrous. Okay, ignorance, profound and deep. Animals have to adjust the amount of food intake that they eat, that they have, according to the calorie density of their natural diet. So the calorie density of the natural diet will shift with the seasons. It will shift with the foodstuffs that are available. And the animals will obviously always tend to be looking for the higher calorie density foods in their environment, but sometimes those foods are not available. And so they have to wind up scavenging and eating grasses, for example, that are less calorie dense than the grasses that were here in the summer. And as a result of that, what's going to happen is they're going to have to eat more. So they're going to eat more. So the satiation point is going to be somewhat different depending upon the calorie density of the food that you're eating. The notion that your stomach is so stupid and that your brain would be so incompetent is that if you were to eat large amounts of food, that it would then stretch out and not be able to rebound appropriately, etc., and therefore you would be an overeater for the rest of your life, no matter what you eat, is ridiculous. I mean, this is just completely horrendous logic and completely nonsensical from the standpoint of biology. The only problem that we face is that we can fool the receptor sites with unnatural food. Unnatural food is what fools the receptor sites, not whole natural food, not whole natural starches. There's no way. There's no way. I have never seen a, quote, volume eater on whole natural food. I've seen people that eat a heck of a lot of food, but those people, go from 300 pounds to 180 pounds, eating enormous amounts of food because they're now eating the food that is consistent with their natural history.
Right, and a lot of times, people on these plans, they don't have a problem with salt. And I find that when it's very easy to overeat food that's salted. It's not very interesting to eat plain food, which is basically what I eat. I don't eat salt, at least not intentionally. And since these food addiction treatment programs don't have a problem on salt, they're going to eat more food. It's going to stimulate their appetite.
Yeah, to some degree. I'm not. Salt's a little bit of an open question. Mm-hmm. So John McDougall and Alan Goldhammer will disagree a little bit there, and I think that the truth's a little bit in the middle.
Yeah, and maybe it could vary from individual to individual.
And I also think that these guys aren't necessarily disagree. I think that you go through periods where if you go from a lower sodium diet to a higher sodium diet, it's going to be hyper palatable for a while until you habituate to that salt level. Mm-hmm. And the same thing is going to be true if you go from a higher sodium diet to a lower sodium diet. You will systematically more aggressively undereat. Yeah. Because the food will not be palatable. Right. And so there's rapid shifts that will take place there that will underscore everybody's point. But the truth is that in the end, I think that people sort of habituate to the sodium level. Right. And the system actually does a pretty good job of dealing with the hunger drive with respect to that chemical. Alan's got his own interesting reasons for wanting to keep people out of sodium, and John is less concerned about those reasons. John's more concerned with more global major changes.
Sure.
And so these are the stylistic differences between two florists.
Yes, right, and they're both wonderful.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
I'm in trouble for that. We may
no,
want to edit that
they
one
probably
out.
won't watch this. And I'm thinking either nobody will watch this or everybody will watch this, and then I'll be like, and again, if you are somebody that is the leader of a weighing and measure plan, I would love to learn more about this. And maybe, Dr. Lisle, maybe you can have a friendly debate with them, because I really want to understand some of the logic. Like, for example, don't exercise, because now I know Dr. Iflin definitely promotes exercise, and she's of all the food addiction people, I love her, and I love Dr. Pam Peak. I think they're wonderful women. I know Dr. Iflin does do weighing and measuring, but what I like about her is she does say, now we can do this vegan, and she helps vegans that want to do that, and that's fine. If you want to do weighing and measuring, please do it. But the ones that say don't exercise, because if you exercise, you'll deplete willpower, and then you won't be able to do weighing and measuring your 17 ounces of food every day. And my understanding is the best thing you could do to recover from an addiction or lose weight for self-esteem and other reasons is to exercise.
Oh yeah, that's just that's just a lack of understanding of human psychology and the nature of the problem that you're facing. Absolutely, you want to exercise, but you can imagine the trap that you're in if you're weighing and measuring your food in a one-size-fits-all program, and you are essentially already working overtime with a starved brain, trying to override the hunger drive, and then we add exercise to that, we add even greater calorie deficiency to that situation. That is a horrendous recipe for certain failure.
Yeah.
So of course the entire thing is haywire, and the entire concept has to go.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. So you talk about in the book The Pleasure Trap, which you guys haven't read, it's that book and the McDougall Program for Maximum Weight Loss, the only two books you need if you want to be slender. I'm telling you, you don't need any other books. You talk about the mechanisms of satiation, the stretch receptors, nutrient receptors, and calorie receptors. Now, today you said they're located in the hypothalamus. I thought they were actually in...
No. You've got receptors in the stomach, but the information is being compiled, and the solution is in the hypothalamus.
Right. So I get a lot of people that say, I don't know when I'm hungry. I don't know when I'm full. So is this a psychological thing? Is it... I mean, how do you not know that, I guess? And what has happened to these people in life that they really don't know, and that they can binge on 10,000 calories and not feel full or not? I mean, what is that when a person says, I don't know? They know.
It's not paying any attention.
Right.
So what they're saying is, I don't seem to know when I'm full because I'm fat. So I must be overeating. I must be going past. Okay? And the answer is, well, if you're fat, you're eating too many calories. But you're not eating too many calories because you're eating too much food. You're eating too many calories because you're eating such concentrated food. Okay, your satiation mechanisms work automatically. There was a minute when you stopped eating. Okay, there was a moment when you had your last bite, and that happens repetitively throughout your week. So don't tell me you don't know when you're full, because you certainly stop eating. You say, well, I could have eaten more. Yes, but you didn't. Okay, so I don't know when I'm hungry. Well, did you then forget to eat for a week? Clearly didn't. So we see that these things are actually under automated control. You no more need to know when you're hungry and when you're full than you need to know when you need air. Yeah. These are automated processes, and people are misunderstanding that we have to essentially take this unconscious process and make it conscious. When you take an unconscious process and make it conscious, you're in trouble. Say, we want to essentially eat the amounts unconsciously. The thing that you want to be eating consciously is the content. If we were in the Stone Age, you would not have to be conscious about the content. You would eat the content unconsciously, because it would all be whole natural foods.
Right.
Okay, but because we have an unnatural environment, that is the variable that we have to become conscious of, not the amount variable. That is a mistake.
Yeah, because people often criticize me that I eat very quickly and that I don't eat mindfully. But I mean, I think that might be a good skill to learn. But if it's
for what? I'm a completely mindless eater.
Yeah.
Okay, the notion that you have to be mindful is this is the the phrase of the day, the great insightful higher plane of consciousness phrase of the day is mindfulness. And people think that, quote, mindfulness about their eating is going to be something important to them. It's nonsense, okay? The only thing you need to be mindful of is what you're eating. Everything else is automatic.
Right.
And that's what we need to do.
And you know what you said a moment ago about the concentration in the diet, you can be a vegan and be fat eating whole natural food. And what I proved with my 50-pound weight loss is when I came to True North and met you and Dr. Goldhammer in January of 2011, I wasn't eating sugar or flour or drinking alcohol, and of course had almost 40 years of not eating animal products, and I wasn't even eating oil, but I was eating too many nuts and dried fruit, and it was the concentration of calories because I wasn't eating large amounts. But when you're eating high caloric, hyper palatable food, you can still be quite overweight. And now what's so cool about the way I eat is I get to eat way, way more food. And I find that incredibly more satisfying than eating, smaller amounts of hyper palatable food, which, works for me. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So this is great. If I could just ask one more question
Right.
on a different topic and answer it quickly, because we
Yes.
could actually do a whole nother episode if you want, anywhere, anytime, about this. But what I hear from some people is when they give up their old comfort foods, whether it's alcohol or cheese or pastries, they say they feel a sense of grief. And I think that when I did that, and before I met you, I did cry for like 3 weeks, but I got over it. So how do you address this emotional stuff, like when they feel grief or they feel fear of letting go of these weighing and measuring? Is there just a quick answer you could? I mean, and they should have a session with you. Go
Yes.
to esteemdynamics.org, and it's incredibly affordable to work with Dr. Lisle privately by phone or Skype. But because I can't help them with the emotional stuff. And they do feel like they're losing a friend when they let go of either a system of weighing and measuring or foods that were their comfort foods.
I understand. What people need to do is they need to understand that they should run experiments in this life to see if they are missing a bet. So we need to run experiments. So you don't have to, quote, walk away from this forever. What you need to do is you need to run an experiment to find out whether the cost benefit of this habit is actually worthwhile. And so that's what you discovered. So you discovered that by essentially getting away from the richer vegan foods, you certainly go through a process while you are thinking about that, and you're going to have some cravings during that process. But then, as the entire experience unfolds, you get to look then at the cost benefit of this, and that enabled you to then sit where you're sitting today, where the cost benefit is overwhelmingly positive to have done it the way that you've done it. So I keep an open mind about this. I'm not anybody's mother, and I'm not a sage that I can read into your mind and find out what is going to be the best life for you. But I can tell you that there are systematic mistakes that we now see in the modern environment where people are compromising their health and their happiness behind very compelling traps. And one of those traps is going to be rich food. And that rich food, I think, even though, of course, you're going to have some consternation about letting it go, what we want to do is essentially tell our mind rationally, is it a worthy experiment? Is it possible that there's a better life on the other side of it? And so that's what we do, and we let the evidence tell us later whether or not it was worth it. And that's how we want to look at it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I learn every time you talk. I just learn more and more. I think you should have a 24-hour show where we can just talk to you all the time. And again, if you're following one of these weighing and measuring programs and it works for you, who are we to tell you not to do it? But so many people have been writing me on a daily basis, struggling with them. So we want you to know there's a different way, and we feel a better way. And you can certainly work with Dr. Lisle privately at esteemdynamics.org. Consider the Ultimate Weight Loss Program. Or better yet, come to True North Health in Santa Rosa or the McDougall program and see Dr. Lisle in person. And you can see him in person on February 19th, 2017. Along with Dr. John McDougall and Dr. Garth Davis at Healthy Taste of Sacramento. And we hope to see you there, Dr. Lisle. A pleasure, an honor, a privilege, and always a joy talking to you. Thank you so much. And thanks for watching Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ. I make healthy taste delicious without weighing or measuring my food. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.